Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show today. I'm really glad you can join us. So today we're going to dive into a really cool topic. We're going to talk about all about how to get your startup off the ground and make it successful, how to avoid all the mistakes that so many entrepreneurs make that end in failure, and how to actually have thriving success in your business. So with us today is Cynthia Del'Aria. Now, Cynthia considers herself to be a startup ninja. She knows how to dig into any idea and find the gold, the killer feature, the thing users absolutely cannot live without. And she knows how to help entrepreneurs turn their idea into a business that will make real money. Now, she started coding when she was 8 years old, and over the past several decades has learned with great technology implementations look like from some of the smartest people in the industry. Now, her first two companies were all about web design and development and finding ways to help companies come into the new era of promoting and doing businesses on the web. And it turns out she has a natural knack for business. So her past experience building her own startups gave her a lens through which to examine what would work for other business types in tech and how to apply those processes and methodologies for other people who have great tech ideas. Now, she developed a curriculum for the Rakia Technologies and got an appidea.com startup program based on what she's done in her own companies and those for her clients, and all one guiding purpose: to help new app and tech entrepreneurs spend as little time and money as possible evaluating their idea, helping them get to a go, no-go decision quickly and efficiently. She's also developed a process to help stakeholders, project managers, and IT professionals of all size companies test new ideas without impacting their actual financial ability to do so. So welcome, Cynthia. Thanks for coming on with us today.
Thanks, Ty. Nice to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm really excited because we work with a lot of startups, and we don't have a lot of guests that come on that specialize in helping people in the startup space, let alone the startup tech space. So there's so many things that I want to dive into and talk about with you.
It's be great. I'm excited.
So I've read a lot of the stuff that you put out there, and one of the cool things I think is where you talk about these critical factors of success for startup. So let's jump in there. Like, from all of your experience, what are these, maybe three, four kind of factors that you see are really essential for startup success?
Yeah. So the two big ones, kind of like almost equally as big as each other, but everything exists in the world of product market fit. Now, what do I mean by that? Are you building something that people need and that they want? Because I've seen so many companies that are building really cool stuff, and I'm putting that in quotes, but it's not for anybody. Like, it's not solving a problem. It's not making someone's life easier. So we always start with, are you solving a problem? Who are you solving it for? And are they willing to spend time, spend money, change their habits, or both, ideally, in order to solve that problem? And that all comes into product market fit. The very next most important thing, once you know you have product market fit, is who is your team. Projects don't execute themselves, and you can't do anything alone or in a vacuum. You have to have the right people at the right times to execute on the plan that you have to get your thing done and to market, etc. And then I would say that the third thing is remembering the M in MVP. So you'll hear a lot of people in tech talk about minimum viable product, except the problem is then they go way off the rails trying to cram in, oh, but it also needs to do this. Oh, but it also needs to do this. The minimum part is literally what's the least amount you can do that solves the problem and gets you to market, because getting to market quickly and effectively and inexpensively and getting to revenue is how you will start to build up that traction that you need, and you will start to be able to listen to your users to find out what they really want next. We get so in our own heads, like, oh, this is such a cool idea and I just need to go build it, and oh my gosh. But we're not building it for ourselves. We're not spending several $100,000 building software to solve a problem for us, right? We're building a solution to solve a problem for our clients. So it's got to resonate with them. So better to put things out there quickly that resonate with them, and then let them tell you what they want you to iterate on. So I'd say those are the three biggest things.
Yeah, and I love those because I see everybody making those exact same mistakes. Starting with the very first thing you mentioned is that I see a lot of people come into the startup space and they say, what do I sell? And I even see people have it may cringe when they're like, I have $500 or this much money to get a business on the ground. What do I sell? And so how do you really find the right problem to solve? I mean, how do you find that the best way to do that? Because some people haven't been impacted. Like, I don't know about you, but I started my business because like I was really in pain from something. And then I went to find the solution to that pain. A lot of us do. But then I found out there's this whole other array of people out there that didn't have that pain and find a solution. They just want to run a business and they're trying to find the problem solved. So what's your advice to figure out what that problem is that you want to try to solve?
Yeah, it's a really great question. So my advice is first to look at home. And when I say look at home, I mean look in your life. What are you already doing every day? What industries do you know really well? What passions do you have in the world, right? You are going to be much better at finding a problem that you can solve if you understand already the area that you're trying to solve it in. So if you're somebody who is a mom and you know a bunch of moms and you're sitting around chatting with them, you should be listening for what's a big problem that they all have that nobody's solved, and what solutions are out there, and why aren't those things working for them, because there could be something really, really juicy and valuable we're targeting moms. And by the way, women are 70+% of the decision makers in buying in our country. So that's not a small market. So always, always, always start with the things that you know, the things that you do every day. You know, it could be in the job that you're already doing for the company that you work for. If you see something where you're like, man, all of our clients are dealing with this problem and it lives in this kind of an area, and I bet I could come up with a solution for that. That's exactly the kind of direction you want to go. So start with what do you know really well, and do a lot of listening, because people are complaining about their problems all the time. The question is, are you listening to them with the intention of then complaining about your problem? Or are you listening to them with the intention of, is there something I could create a business out of solving these problems?
It's very true. People do complain about their problems all the time.
Yes, they
You
do.
should have no hard time listening.
Why do I have a whole series called the Startup Therapy Couch for that very reason.
I'll tell you how you find a problem to solve. Get a kid. Just get a
That's
kid.
right.
You have a kid, you'll find plenty of problems that people solve.
That's exactly right.
What do you think so many businesses that try this, fail? Because you see the stats I see. I mean, the vast majority of these startups that try to do it fail is that they found the wrong problem to solve. I mean, what do you think accounts for why the higher percentage of people don't make it that do?
It's an interesting question. So TechCrunch did a study, and actually it's interesting because it was independently verified by a study that Harvard and Statistic Brain did, like about 6 months later, without either of them knowing that they were both doing the same thing. But TechCrunch did, or Crunchbase actually did a postmortem of like 1,000 startups that failed in 2018. So they closed their doors, and they said, they asked all these founders and their board members and their advisors and their investors, like, what really went wrong? 42%, nobody wanted or needed what they were building. Product market fit was the biggest category. The next largest category down was they ran out of money, and that was only 29%. 42% of all of those that failed or that closed their doors in 2018 did so because they weren't building something that people wanted. So there's a lot of reasons why things fail. And I think one of the biggest things that happens is people take too long to fail. So that, you hear it a lot in tech, like fail fast, fail often. And it sounds like really bad news, right? Like, why would I want to fail? That sounds really bad. Our whole goal is to get you to that decision point where you go, whoa, like there's no money to be made here, as quickly and as cheaply as we possibly can. Because entrepreneurs who spend a lot of time and a lot of money getting to a failure are usually pretty beaten down by that process, and they don't generally tend to innovate beyond that. Here's the problem. If you already have that entrepreneurial spirit, there's something you're supposed to create in the world. I want you to find that thing faster so you can be out delivering on your purpose. So that's where fail fast, fail often comes from, right? Like, I'd rather we spend 6 months like tooling through from your original idea to various pivots until we find the thing that's just like, oh my gosh, yep, here it is. And here's all the people, and it totally makes sense. And I can see the MVP, and here's how the revenue is and the monetization works. And like, I would rather we do that than spend 6 months building out the original idea only to spend 2.5 or 3 more years trying to sell that original idea to then realize that it didn't work. So product market fit. If nobody wants what you're building, it's not going to matter how cool it is, not going to matter how technologically advanced it is. Like, none of that's going to matter. You have to be building something people want.
So how do you do that? I mean, do you come out and build an MVP to start, or is there a way to either gather that intelligence before you build an MVP and start finding out somehow, some way? Like, I can easily survey our own database because we have one, right?
Yep.
But if I'm a startup, I don't have that. So is it possible to start surveying and getting information and intelligence another way before you even build the MVP?
Totally. So what I love to do, we have like a 6 or 7 step process. It's either 6 or 7. I can't remember. I think it's 6. So we always start with blue sky your idea. What that means is get out everything you possibly can think of. If you could wave a magic wand today and your idea would just exist in the world, what are all the things it would do? Who are all the user roles? Like what are all the features and functions and like get it all out, because if it's rattling around in your brain, you're never going to be able to get focused enough to get to that MVP. The second thing we then do is we slash and burn it. So we go through everything that we wrote down and we say, if it relies on big data, it's out for MVP unless you have millions of dollars to go buy that seed data. If it's something that requires more than one user, we slash and burn it. You have to find the thing that day one, user one will get value out of. Otherwise, they're never coming back. So you can never build up that user base that you need to generate that data or to create community value or whatever it is, right? Once you've got an idea for what that one, maybe 2 critical core functions are that really solve the problem you're out to solve, then you go talk to people. You figure out who would be the ideal kind of user for this, and we call that user personas. And you create those user personas, 1 or 2 sort of straw man type personality, with personality traits and habits and, and age ranges and whatever. And you find people like that in your life, on Facebook, on LinkedIn. There's so many ways to find these kind of people. And I highly, highly recommend that people go outside of their like immediate friends and family network, because you don't want to get the bias of people who just love you. And you find the people who fit your ideal users and you go talk to them and you say, you kind of give them like we call it like a 1 sentence product statement or value statement, where you're basically saying, here's sort of the problem that I'm trying to solve. Tell me what you think about that, and what solutions are you using now, and what do you like about those, and what don't you like, and you just and it's a conversation, right? And if you have enough of those, I feel like anywhere like 20 on the short end up to 50 on the high end, to just validate the problem and validate those users. Now trends are going to start to emerge, and whatever those trends are, you're going to notice them. You're going to start to hear the same things over and over. So now you go back and do that exercise of blue sky and slash and burn with all those trends that you saw emerge, and see, do those stand up to user one, day one gets value. From all of that, you then distill down, these are the few things, 2, 3 things that it takes for me to get to market, solve the problem, provide value so that I can start charging. And you only focus on that. That's it. All of that other stuff goes into a backlog. You don't even think about it again until you're in the market and users are asking you for it. MVP is so, so critical, because you need to spend as little time and as little money as you can getting real users and getting real traction in your product.
In the survey data and for what you've seen, are there things that all startups do that help them succeed? Like, is it the opposite? I mean, we know it makes them fail, but like, are the things that like the startups that succeed are always doing these things?
Yes, they're always involving the absolute right people, and they're treating people really well. So your team, it takes people to execute on anything. You can build the best vision and the best execution plan. You can have product market fit that will give you all 7.5 billion people on the planet need what you have. If you don't have a team that understands the product, understands the vision, and that you can guide them to executing on that vision, it won't matter. The team is always, if the team factor isn't there, it's never successful. I've seen it time and again. People have all the other things, but their team members just, they're either not committed to the vision, or they're not the right people, who have the right knowledge for that vision, or they don't understand the space or the industry. Then it's never going to be successful. So people matter above everything else.
So true. I think about that. We have nearly 70 team members, and we've only had one ever quit our company in 8 years. And
That's impressive.
I know it's crazy, but I think about it, it's because of what you just said. I mean, we only hire completely based on our purpose. Like if they come into our interviews and are like, I love what you do and that mission, and they're hired. Like we'll teach
Yeah.
them everything else. We just need to
Yeah.
have that passion. But
That's
it's
right.
just so true. If you get the people that are behind the mission, that see the vision, that want to back that, it's insane the links that your team will go through to get your back to make sure you have success. Which, speaking of success, how do you get long-term success? I mean, we've talked about surviving or failing, especially in the short term, and doing it quickly, but how do you really build a company that's with long-standing potential to be successful?
So, assuming that you have product market fit and you get to market and you're solving people's problem and you're starting to generate that revenue, long-term success is about listening to what your customers are telling you and following the 85-15 rule. So here's the 85-15 rule. You can never please all of the people all of the time. We've heard that. That's 100%. But most of the time, in most cases, 85% of your customers are going to be saying about the same thing. They're going to be asking you for something, or they're going to be telling you, hey, this is what I'd really like to see next, or this would really solve this additional problem that I have. You want to focus on those because you're probably never going to be able to make the 15% happy, because if they're outliers, first of all, they're probably the ones that are complaining the most about your pricing, even if it's really super reasonable. And second of all, if you're trying to solve for them, you're going to neglect the 85%. So as you get through revenue, as you're starting to grow, as you're starting to decide, okay, what goes next into our roadmap, what's the next problem we need to solve, or the next feature set we need to build, or things that we can add to provide more value, or upcharge, upsell, you need to be listening to your customers, and that's how you create longevity. I have a software company that I own. We build software for the airline industry. Okay, specifically, we solve problems with pilot and crew bidding because they have to bid for their schedules every month. And the companies provide a system to do this, but it was built by engineers, not by pilots. So pilots don't understand how it works. So we built a very simple iPad app that does a translation from pilot speak to underlying bidding system speak, and we charge $50 a month. It's wildly successful and has been for over 6 years, even in this downturn where airlines have cut their flights by 70% or more. Our pilots are sticking with us because they know they can pick up the phone and talk to a human any day, any time of day, any day of the week, any day, like 365, 24/7, right? That listening to your customers, being there for your customers, world-class support to your customers is always a very, very high likelihood indicator of companies that will survive the long term.
So true. My dad always taught me that the people that build cars are not the ones that fix them, or they would
That's
be
exactly right.
built completely differently. How do you mitigate risk when you're doing this? I mean, how do you lower your risk of failure and increase your chances of success beyond the stuff that we've talked about so far?
Yeah, so one of my favorite methods for mitigating risk as much as possible is bootstrapping. It mitigates risk on a couple different levels. So when I say bootstrapping, I mean investing your own time and your own money as much as humanly possible before you get someone else's money involved. Finding co-founders, sharing, giving up a percentage of your idea to co-founders that have skills that are different than yours, immensely valuable, because now you've got multiple people who are bootstrapping with you. The problem that happens when you start to bring in outside capital, friends and family money, not so much, but the second you get into like formal seed money or angel investors, definitely into VC, is the less traction you have, meaning if you're not to market yet, or if you don't have revenue that they can measure your company against or your value against, you give away a lot more of your company for a very, very little amount of money. So the more that you can get creative with how you compensate people who are working with you, how you pay for services, doing pitch events to win money or looking for grants, the more creative you can get to revenue before you start asking other people for money, the better off you're going to be. Every single one of my companies, I have not yet taken a dime from an investor ever. My first company, I had a very successful exit after 4 years. My second company was almost 5 years. I had a successful exit. And obviously the software company for the airline industry is an extremely successful company. We've never taken a dime of capital. It is possible. You just have to get creative, and you got to look in your network for people who have skills that you need that you don't have, and find a way to make it worth their while. Get them excited again about your vision.
Cynthia,
But bootstrapping is my favorite.
And I agree with that completely. And I'm in the funding space, and I agree with that completely.
I know.
You try to fund your business as much yourself. But a lot of people look at like venture capital. I see they see shows like Shark Tank, for example. So what's your advice there? What are the things you really need to know about before you even think about going to one of these investors? Because I think of them as vultures just because it's the reputation they have. But what are things that people should know?
So the first thing you should know is if you don't have revenue yet, you're going to get a crappy deal. And if you're okay with that, because it's what you need to get to revenue, and you're all right with giving up probably the majority of your company and likely the majority of control to get there, then great. But it is a crappy deal. The more you get to revenue, and the more you can generate customers and generate traction, the better the deal you can get, because you will get more people interested, right? People want to bet on a thing that looks more sure. If all you have is an idea and you're not to the market yet, and you don't have any signed customers, and you don't have any traction, you don't have any revenue, you're a much bigger risk than someone who's making $200,000 or $300,000 a year because they're in the market already. It's also a lot harder to value a company pre-revenue, because what is it really worth? The ideas really don't have a value. We like to think that they do, and we patent and trademark and try to protect our intellectual property, but there's no real monetary value there. The monetary value comes from what do you turn that into, and how do you sell it, and how much of it can you sell. So anytime this is exponentially more with VC. Most VC firms, most venture capitalists won't even look at you if you're not to revenue yet. But the more traction, the more revenue, the further towards your goals, and the more accurate you have been in your forecasting up to the point when you start asking them for money, the lower their risk is, which means you get a better deal. So the more you can lower the risk of investing in yourself and your company, the better the deal you will get.
What do you think about, ways to get money, like crowdfunding platforms where you're talking about a customer-funded startup? What do you think about those kind of concepts?
I have seen them work really, really well. I think they can be really useful if you're manufacturing a widget, or you have like a physical product, because it can be very difficult to get, the kind of funding that you need in order to get into a manufacturing process and a design process and all that kind of stuff. And so it's actually sort of a way of pre-selling, which is my other really favorite way of like bootstrapping a business, is pre-selling. It's sort of like saying, here's our idea, here's our prototype, we're putting together a video based on some work that we've done to show you what we're thinking. Buy in and we'll go build it. And so it's actually doing product and market validation while getting you the money so you can go do the thing. So I love it for stuff like that. I think it can be, if you're going to do it, this comes back to something I said earlier. The only way to make it successful and make sure that you do it right is to stay in touch with the people who invested in you. And always remember, they can come after you for that money if for some reason you fail or whatever. I mean, I've seen that happen, but staying in touch with them and telling them what's going on with the process. And if you get behind, here's why, and here's what we're doing about it. And the more you're in contact with them, the more likely they are to feel invested emotionally in the journey, not just, hey, I gave you money, where's my product? So there's ways to make them really successful, but you have to be really intentional. And if at all possible, I would look, before you go on to one of those platforms, look at other campaigns that were successful, reach out to their founders and see if they'd be willing to have a 20 or 30-minute conversation with you about what worked and what didn't with their campaign.
How do you get in front of the right people? I see that as a common mistake that people make too. So, for example, like we have 3-page customer avatar for every product we sell. We understand that because we have data, but startups don't have that luxury, So how do you kind of really figure out who your avatar is in the very beginning?
Well, that comes back to what problem are you solving and who are you solving it for? And if you're not crystal clear about the problem, then you're probably never going to be crystal clear about who it is that's going to have the problem and why they need it to be solved. Why is it painful enough for them to need it to be solved? If you're really clear about the problem and you're having the right kind of conversations with people who you think might be part of your ideal customer base, you can start to narrow that in. Even in those 20 to 50 conversations that we talked about at the beginning of our session here, you will start to narrow in and you'll say, oh, actually, like these 10 that I talked to, now that I see the full body of data, they don't really fit into my ideal customer. What is it about these 30 or 40 that do fit? What are their common traits? Where are the places they hang out? What are the things they have in common? You can gather enough to get you to MVP and to get you generating revenue so that you can start building that data and you can start understanding who are the people who are buying from us mostly and who are our really good clients who are paying for us and who are the ones that we're willing to do more to keep them and what are those common traits. So this isn't something, as I'm sure you know, where you create your user personas, these are my ideal clients, and you never look at that again. It will evolve over time. Even in Rika, we've only been here a little over 3 years doing this process this way. We have evolved our ideal client probably 3 or 4 times in that time because we made some assumptions. We went out and found some clients that met those assumptions. Some of them were really successful, some of them weren't. We looked at those 2 different things and we evolved our user personas and our ideal client to more tweak towards the ones that were successful. So then we had greater amounts of success, and when we had failures, we tweaked it again. So this is an ongoing evolutionary process, just like your business is ongoing and evolutionary once you get started. So it's okay in the beginning to say, this is what I think. I'm going to validate this by having some real conversations. I'm going to tweak it if I need to. And then I'm going to get myself to market as quickly and cheaply as possible with a true MVP so that I have real data and I can start making revenue and I can earn money validating that and tweaking that over time.
And when you're doing that, how do you get in front of those people? How do you get in front of the right people at the right time? Because what I think is interesting is Facebook accounts for it's sick, like the vast majority of advertising spend in the country. But Facebook, I kind of see of it as, it's weird because it's like I find stuff on there I want that I never knew I wanted, right? And that's why I love Facebook. I just go on there for the ads because Mark Zuckerberg take all my information and show me stuff I didn't know existed that I want. But
exactly right.
How do you do it? I mean, how do you really get in front of the right people with a targeted message to make sure that you get in front of those people? What have you seen is working well right now in 2020?
It's a really great question, and I don't pretend to be a marketing expert at all. We hire people to do messaging and languaging and who are we needing to be in front of and all that kind of stuff. But social media platforms are incredibly, incredibly valuable. The other one that I would say is really valuable, which it's just going to sound weird, but radio, because the type of people who are listening to radio, if you pick the right kind of channels and if your message is one that's really quick and easy to comprehend, radio can be really effective because you hear a lot of the same stuff over and over, but here's really why it works. If you've got some social media campaigns out there, whether it's LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram, depending on who your people are, and then you pair that with, a few hits every week or every day, on a radio station, now they've heard about it 2 different ways and it's that much more likely to stick. And that's the whole key with sales and marketing is they need to hear it a few times and preferably in different ways, because then it starts to trigger that is it a tiger? Should I be afraid of it? Like survival response where they're like, wait, I've now heard this twice. This must be important. Right? But it's not coming from the same place, so I've tuned it out. So any strategy I feel like has to have at least 2 different types of media, but you need to be targeting the same people. So it doesn't work to be doing Instagram ads and then targeting a radio show where it's all 50 plus listeners, because those people aren't on Instagram, right? Those things don't line up. So you're just like scattershot with a shotgun, right? So I think that's generally a strategy we use. The seeds to work really well. Some form of social media, and then pairing it with some other traditional type of advertising. We like radio because a lot of our listeners are business owners, and a lot of them listen to radio during drive time. So, yeah.
I think as an entrepreneur, I don't think I'm alone, that a lot of us have ADD and
Yeah.
shiny objects.
Yeah.
And so,
Serial entrepreneur, startup ninja or startup junkie, depending on the day.
so my question is like, does it make sense to run multiple startups at the same time, or should you focus on one? And if you can run multiple, any advice on how to run multiple endeavors at the exact same time?
You cannot start up something new and do multiples at the same time. So you can't say, hey, I've got these 3 different ideas. I'm going to start all of them, and whichever one wins, that's the one I'll focus on. It's never going to work. In the startup phase, in the true startup phase, which I would say is like until you're at revenue where the thing's kind of humming along and doing its thing, and you've got people, your team's sort of worked out, and you've got a process in place, and it's not really requiring 180% of your time anymore. It has to be the only thing you do. If you divide your time and you divide your focus, nothing you're doing is going to turn out well. Now, that said, I have 3 software companies. How do I do that? I didn't start them all up at the same time, right? I started the first one. I got it to a place where it was humming along, doing its thing, didn't require as much of my time. And then I realized that I was ready to start something else. And that thing didn't need me nearly as much because I have processes and people and teams, et cetera, in place, and it does what it needs to do. And when it does need my attention, it's usually quick fixes or I need to step in and solve a problem or something like that. So it's not pulling my focus because it's not a baby. That's actually a really great analogy. It's like trying to have triplets, having 3 businesses at once, like having twins, having 2 businesses at once, except that the needs of both of those things are not going to be the same the way that the needs of the 2 babies are the same. But it's going to be just as tiring, just as distracting, just as much like sharing your focus, except now you're trying to remember who needs what. So it's incredibly distracting, and unless you have like really laser focus, really good focus on the thing that you want to succeed, it's never going to happen. You're just going to keep, falling flat.
Having a few successful exits, and I found that, businesses should think about the end in the beginning, to get maximum value for the business. But what are some of the important things to think about before you even start thinking about selling the business?
Yeah, I would say when you're designing the idea for your startup or creating the vision, thinking about the exit strategy is very, very important. And especially when you start talking to investors, they want to know because they want a return on their money of, X amount by 3 to 5 years or 5 to 7 years or whatever it is, right? However, if your vision is to create a lifestyle business or a legacy business that you pass on to your children, you need to know that up front because that's a whole different business and a whole different kind of investor who will get involved with that, like an ongoing concern, than something where you say, great, I'm going to work on this for the next 7 years. It's going to be my whole life. And in 7 years, this is where I envision selling it for 100 million or 20 million or 5 million or 500 million, whatever it is, right? And that should be based on your market. Don't just guess. But having that vision will help you set up yourself to make sure that you're solving the right problems along the way and creating the right solutions for the right markets to actually hit that metric. If you just kind of start, you could be really successful, but you don't really know what you're aiming at. And so it's much harder to talk to an investor when you don't know what you're aiming at and say, well, we don't really know what our exit's going to be, but we need $150,000 to execute the next phase. And okay, but how am I going to get my money back? Like, what's that look like for me? So planning early on, what kind of business do I want? Do I want an exit? Do I want it to be a legacy that I leave for my family? All of that helps you get your vision really clear, and it keeps you on track. That's the thing that keeps calling you forward to make the right decisions at the right time and work with the right people. It's really, really important. It's a great question.
How did you know when the right time was to sell your businesses?
Well, the first time I was 19 years old, and I was approached by a competitor of mine. So we had been in a little bidding war over a very, very lucrative client. And because I had a small, like really agile company and a very, very low overhead, I mean, nobody could touch my price. But more than that, my reputation was really good because I've always believed that people matter and world-class customer service is really important. So we ended up winning this bid, and one of our competitors came to me and said, we really want that relationship. We'll do it for the price that you're doing it for. We don't care about that, but we want the relationship because we want the long term. And they said, we're willing to buy your entire company and all your portfolio of maintenance contracts and everything that you do, if you will transition that relationship and make sure that we get to keep it once the sale is done. And I was 19 years old, and I was like, yeah, okay, great, right? So they kind of approached me. The second company, we had developed encryption technology and key algorithm technology for companies that were transitioning traditionally box software into like online updates, online downloads. And we did some really cool stuff early on. And so we had a couple of different companies that were much larger than ours that had similar pieces of that space who wanted our technology. And so we basically put a price on it and went out and bid it in the open market and ended up doing a sale that way. So there's lots of different ways that you could, end up in a sales situation. It could be surprising, like my first one, or it could be sort of intentional, like my second one.
What are some things that in your experience you've learned that people can do to prepare their business the best they can to be sold?
Oh, it's a great question. Um, the more work you're willing to do from the beginning to keep your books really clean, to make sure that the way you set up your employment contracts and the way that you work with vendors and contractors and what you have in-house versus what you have like in a vendor relationship or a contract relationship out of house, the more clean everything is from that perspective, the easier the due diligence process is. And you have to be really realistic about what your business is actually worth. In both my first businesses, in the second business, we did have a technology piece, but the reason our technology was really successful is because we were really great at who we worked with on it. So it was really our client base that was the value. We didn't have some amazing technology that all these companies were like clamoring for, right? So your multiplier, you have to have a reasonable expectation of what you're going to be able to get. You also need to start to think about some buyers are looking at a multiplier on revenue, which is great. Some are looking at a multiplier on profit, which is not so great. But you have to know, do my profit margins need to be higher in order for me to get a better deal? Or do I just need to hit revenue targets because this company is looking to acquire companies like mine? So from the beginning, setting up your structure and taking care of your people and making sure that your business itself is really clean and really well-oiled machine is important. And then once you start getting towards that exit event, making sure that you're thinking about how do I optimize and being realistic about what's the true value of your company. Because you may really, really want to sell it for 20 million. If it's only worth 5, nobody's going to buy it for 20. So you either need to do a little more work to get yourself to 20, or you just got to be cool with 5, take your 5 million and go build the next thing that could be worth 20 or 50 or whatever.
Great advice today. And as we get ready to wrap up, what didn't we cover that you think is important for startups to know to have the best chance of success?
Specifically related to tech, be really, really wary of getting super excited about something that's really bleeding edge technology. It's really easy to get sucked into like the sexy, blockchain, whatever kind of pitch, and think that I really need that in order to solve the problem that I'm trying to solve. 99.9 times out of 100, you don't. Don't get sucked into putting too much emphasis on cool, sexy, bleeding edge, whatever technology, when really what you need is to get to market and start solving people's problems. You can always own your tech later. I'm a huge fan of looking for solutions out there that I can kind of tweak a little bit to fit my needs, like platform as a service solutions or e-commerce solutions, community-based solutions that I can use to get out in the market quickly and start earning revenue. And then I can build what I need out of what I'm using in my custom software with revenue from the business as I grow. and eventually replace somebody else's system with mine and own the tech. I don't think you need to own the tech out the door unless the thing that you're doing is building some bleeding edge technology. That's very, 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 very few, if any, of the people who are probably listening to your podcast. So, and generally very few of the people in my network or in my audience either. So
Where
don't
can
get too
everybody go?
fancy.
Oh, Enzo, I love your response. Where can everybody go to learn more and hear more about the cool advice that you have?
Yeah, everything starts from raikatech.com, raikatech.com. The Startup Therapy Couch stuff is there. You can get to our blogs. All of our social media is there. So everything starts there.
Thanks for coming on with us today.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ty. This was really, really great. And I
Yeah.
love your podcast, and I'm super excited to be on it. You've had some really cool guests, and I feel very honored. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm honored to have had you. A lot of great stuff. And thank you so much for sharing it. You know, so everybody listening, this has been great. I mean, this is some of the best advice that I've seen. Our company and so many other companies that I've seen really achieve massive levels of success have done the things that Cynthia talked about today. So make sure you visit her website. Okay. I'm going to spell it out for you so you know exactly how to get there. It's raikatech.com. That's raikatech.com. So make sure you visit their blog. There's so much information. We only scratched the surface of everything that's there. And there's more being added like on a regular basis too. So there's so much great advice for startups, for those in the tech space, as well as people that are leading growing businesses. So raikatech.com, raikatech.com. We'll also put that on Cynthia's podcast page, and you can find that at creditsuite.com/podcast. So thanks everybody for tuning in. Have a great day.